Which is the better Dragon Ball Z game series on PS2? Budokai or Budokai Tenkaichi, also known as Sparking? If you were a fan of Dragon Ball Z and played video games back when the PS2 was the main console, then you most likely played a game for one of these two series. But which of the two series was better? How much did the series evolve? And are they even good games? Well, just like my last video, we'll be looking at the first and last games of each series and how each series evolved, and finally comparing the two series as a whole. So let's get started with Budokai 1. Starting with this game sure does take me back. Not just because it was my first PS2 game, but because the game's presentation is to make you feel like you were watching the show like back in the day. The intro is a remake of the show's intro, and even the story mode has a feel of the show with the title card and the announcer.
Mysterious alien attack.
But the best part is how they redid a bunch of the scenes with PS2 in-game graphics. Of course, they can't redo everything, so they kind of made an abridged version of the show. It is mostly just fights Goku had with a few other key fights in there as well. They let you redo a few fights with other characters after you beat the story mode, like being able to fight Raditz as Piccolo, and even some cool what if scenarios like, what if Cell absorbed Krillin? I do like the PS2 graphics and how they show the story, but sadly, it only goes up to the Cell Saga. It feels like they went all out on the story presentation, but what about the gameplay? The gameplay is a traditional 3D fighter. You mostly fight on a 2D plane and you can sidestep, giving you that third dimension to work with. The 4 face buttons are used for punching, kicking, blocking, or key blast. Weirdly enough, you can also use the right analog to replace the face buttons. This isn't just for psychopaths though. This kind of makes sense with another mechanic we'll talk about soon. You can do different combos by mixing in punches and kicks, and if you do the right combination, you can sometimes end it by doing a special attack by pressing the key blast button at the end. Some special moves even have more than one way of doing them to give you variations. This works well, but some combos feel super precise or almost unusable. An example is the Kamehameha. It has a version where when you finish the Kamehameha, the character would just tank it, but the time it takes for your character to be able to move again is longer than it does for your opponent to recover from being hit. So that means they get a free combo on your ass because you use this version of the Kamehameha. Some other moves are even worse, as you have to be super precise in the combo line when you do them, and if you mess up, the enemy can block parts of it, giving them a free hit or combo. It does not help that a lot of these moves are just the same move between characters with different names. We have Continuous Key Blast Wave, Continuous Kamehamehas, and even Parmesan Shower. One mechanic that we will see in every single one of these games we're going to talk about is clashes. If 2 strong hits clash, you'll go into this Windows Vista screensaver world and do the cool thing from the show. It becomes a button mashing time because to win, you have to hit all the buttons. And one thing you can do instead is spin the right analog to simulate pressing buttons, which is probably why you can do button presses with it. Besides clashes, the strong hit also serves as a way to get past blocking enemies. If you charge the last hit, you can break through their guard. But this is dependent on combo lines and the moves the character has. The move the character can do is dependent on how far along the story mode you are. So when you fight Nappa, you can only do the Kamehameha and one other move. But while fighting Frieza, you now have the Spirit Bond on top of the other moves. After every fight, you'll be rewarded with a capsule that will unlock a character or moves you can use in the other modes. These modes are Duel and Tournament. There is another mode called Legend of Hercule, a scenario where Hercule fights everyone in the Sound games and wins somehow. It's good for a single playthrough to hear Hercule's thought and trash talking everyone in there. The mode you'll be playing a lot is Tournament, as this is the best way to earn money. What is this money used for? To buy more capsules. In the skill shop, you can buy skills which are attack, techniques, support, a random capsule, and the last one is a recommendation, which is what they recommend to buy next. I like the option of customization in games, so you can play them however you want. But this game forces you to do customization. This is because you have moves locked behind customization. I can understand having customization like adding attack power, less key consumption, or giving your opponent a heart disease. However, gating special moves is a bit disappointing, because the reason you're playing this game is to do the Kamehameha. This was probably done to balance how some characters have 3 times as many moves as others, but still, I want to be able to do all the special moves. To even get Super Saiyan with Goku, I need to use up 4 out of my 7 slots, and they knew this. because they added this capsule called Breakthrough Skill. This takes up all the slots and gives you access to all the characters' moves. It's a skill everyone wants, so they made it the most annoying one to get. To get it, you need to obtain the 7 Dragon Balls, which you have to buy from the skill shop, but they only show up in the recommendation slot. So if you do not see it, you have to back in and out of the shop until it shows up. After you get lucky enough to buy all 7, you get to summon Shenron, and you'll be able to get 1 breakthrough skill, and then you have to do it all over again. There are 23 characters in this game. To sum it up, this game is all style and very little substance. The story mode and the presentation of that is amazing with its recreation of playing the show with its charming PS2 graphics, but the game falls apart with its gameplay. Attacks are stiff and inconsistent, while having you to do a lot of work to even get to the level where characters feel fun to play. I can only recommend playing this game for the story mode and maybe a single playthrough of Legend of Hercule. Now that we're done talking about Budokai 1, let's do as the creators of Dragon Ball and forget about the second form and jump straight to Budokai 3. Budokai 3 starts with an animated intro of them all having a one-on-one fight with some of the major villains of the show and movies. It has a very cool intro song, but sadly it was replaced in the HD remake because the original composer allegedly plagiarized a lot of his songs. Let's start with this game's story mode, and it's a bit underwhelming compared to the first game. It mostly consists of character cutouts that talk with speech bubbles. There aren't any cutscenes or recreation of the show scenes. It seems to go for this arcade mode style for the story mode. You get to pick from a select few characters and you play through all their major fights, and each character has a different length story. Goku has the longest since he fights in all the arcs, and Kid Gohan has fewer fights since he only fights in the Saiyan and Namek saga. Then we have characters like Yamcha, who only has 3 fights. It also has an RPG element where you can level up stats after fights, which I guess is fine, but I've never been a big fan of this type of thing in a fighting game. There is a mode dedicated to this level up mechanic, which we will talk about later. Back to the story mode, they deviated from the usual arcade mode style by having an overworld you can travel around. You can travel across Earth or Namek depending on what part of the story you're in. The game covers the Saiyan, Namek, Android, and Buu saga. It is neat to be able to see specific landmarks from the show and visit them to progress the story or get extra goodies. As cool as this overworld looks, it feels more like padding to me. The only spot you will find highlighted on the map is the next story point, and you have to fly around randomly until you get this banner letting you know something is nearby or get distracted by a shiny thing. There are a couple of items you can find like money, capsules, and a dragon radar. Before we talk about the Dragon Radar, I do want to talk about the capsules, which are back in this game. You will have to travel around and get lucky enough to get a capsule with a special move to add to your list, or wait until the game decides to give you a capsule when you progress far enough into the story. If you don't go out of your way to try and find capsules, you will have very few moves to play with in the story mode. But let's talk about the most important thing, the gameplay. How does the game play? Well, it's a lot better than the first game. It retains a lot of the same elements, which makes the game feel much more responsive and fluid. Moves are still performed as part of the combo, but you can also now perform some standalone, which is neat for long range attacks. This also means they have beam clashes, which means you're gonna be rotating those thumbsticks, baby! They even added teleportation attacks. One allows you to follow up on the enemy after you knock them away, with each teleportation taking away 1 key bar. And the other is a counter attack where you teleport behind the enemy before the attack hits you, but it takes up 3 key bars. The biggest new mechanic they brought into this game is Hyper Mode. You activate it whenever you want, and it's like the character is going into Kaioken. In this mode, you'll be able to activate your ultimate move if you have enough ki and is equipped before you activate it, or you can go into Dragon Rush mode. Dragon Rush mode is this game of rock, paper, scissors where you pick one of the 4 face buttons and the defender tries to pick the same button as the attacker. Each time the attacker wins, the button they choose is eliminated, giving the defender a better chance to stop the attack. By the 3rd time the attacker wins, they usually finish it off with a big move. What was interesting to me is what happens if the defender guesses correctly on one of the 3 tries. The first one is a 1 out of 4, so if you guess correctly, you do damage. The second one is a 1 out of 3 and you get no damage. With the last one being a 50-50 chance, and if you guess correctly, you only take a little bit of damage. The Hyper Mode has some of the flashiest moves in this game, but it's just razzle dazzle for me. It kinda turns the fights on its head because of the cost and benefits of this form. The downside of this form is that you can't charge your ki while in it, and if you let it go all the way, you go into fatigue. Another issue is that you cannot block in this form, but there are ways around these 2 issues. Blocking is not a big deal because your character has armor in this mode. He can tank light hits but will fall if hit with a stronger hit, and a strong hit would have broken your guard anyway. To avoid the fatigue, you need to land your ultimate special or a Dragon Rush. Now, can you guess what issues this will cause in the fight for the defender? They have two options: wait until their hyper mode runs out by doing strong hits and running away, or go into hyper mode themselves to negate their armor. It usually becomes this cat and mouse game of who or if someone can perform Dragon Rush before the key is finished, which leads to a guessing game afterwards. If you have not unlocked many moves, this hyper mode is the best use of your key in the game sadly. And just like the last game, you better go buy some capsules. You of course want to get the best capsule, which is the breakthrough skill, and there are two ways to get them. For some characters, you need the Dragon Balls to summon Shenron. And how do you find them? Remember the Dragon Radar that I talked about in story mode? Well, you can change the minimap to a Dragon Radar, and you have to fly around the map hoping you find them. The amount you find on the map depends on how many sagas that character has. For example, Goku appears in all the sagas, while Kid Gohan only appears in the Saiyan and Namek saga. For Goku, it'll be 1 to 3 per saga, while for Kid Gohan, it's 3 to 4 per saga. The game does not tell you if you collected all the Dragon Balls per saga, so you'll be flying around multiple times to make sure you got them. And if you miss one, that's it. You have to restart the story mode with that character. For any character not in the story mode, you have to buy them later when you unlock all the characters and the right membership cards. There are 39 playable characters with 3 extras from the fusion mechanic in this game. The other modes to use the breakthrough skills are duel and tournament modes, which are self-explanatory, and the new Dragon Arena mode. Here you'll face another player or a ladder of enemies using the RPG mechanics from the story mode. You can level up your character and progress as you climb up. It's an interesting mode to play, but I'm not too drawn to the RPG mechanics of this mode. So, this game is a massive improvement in the gameplay compared to the first one. It kept the interesting mechanics of the original game while improving the combat. Combos feel so much better, and being able to do certain moves outside of combos is nice. It's a bit of a shame that the hyper mode they added feels like a detriment to the mode, and they kept the annoying lock special moves behind capsules with limited slots. I did enjoy the game, and once you unlock everything, it can be a lot of fun, but the work it takes to get there is a bit of a slog. If you're willing to put in the effort, the 2-player game mode is a lot of fun, but I don't think the single player mode is good enough to keep most hooked to unlock everything. Let's see if this series is the strongest under the heavens when we look at Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. The intro to this game is this epic battle royale of the Z fighters against many of the villains of the show. However, it looks like they all crashed through an oil factory. This game presents the story mode in an interesting perspective of viewing it through Shenron's memories. It makes sense, since he's always at the end of each arc cleaning up everyone's mess. The game separates arcs and movies into these gates where you can play through. My favorite thing this game does, it has these opening and closing scenes where they recreate parts of the show with the in-game mechanics. It's not just using in-game models, but with in-game controls with some slight editing. I love it, and I hate that they hide it behind these tiny videos and these walls of text. It reminds me a lot of those old machinima videos on YouTube like Red vs Blue. The game makes you play through the major fights and a few adjacent fights if you want, so you can fight Cell Juniors with everyone in the Cell games, even Yamcha. We also get some gates that are what if or different perspective fights like, which psychic shrimp is better? Godo versus Chaozu. Chaozu in this game is pretty brutal. He called Godo disgusting and then kicked him while he was down. That kick is one of the few animations you'll see in this game, as it's mostly just talking character models with very few movements, besides the paragraphs they put on screen sometimes. One thing that is a bit annoying is the fights that the story mode has. There are 3 types of fights in this game, and they are beat the enemy, beat them with a specific move, or survive. Beating them is easy enough, and the specific move is a bit troublesome if you forget how you're supposed to beat them, but surviving is just annoying. They give the enemy too much health for you to be able to beat them, and most of them hit like a dump truck. If you want to win, you have to exploit an odd mechanic, which we'll talk about later, but before that, let's talk about the basic gameplay. How does this game play? Well, it's a 3D arena fighter. You get to move around any direction you want, even fly up or down. You have 2 fight modes. There's a close-up fight mode where you move around a bit slower to be able to fight hand to hand. There's only 1 attack button in this game. The variation in the combos come from either leaving the attack button pressed to send the enemy flying in a direction, or pressing the energy button mid-combo to send them flying or break through their guard. Players on the receiving end can counter in a couple of ways depending on the attack. One is blocking the attack by guarding, or just sidestepping out of the way. The best way to dodge from an enemy attack is to teleport out of the way. To teleport, you just have to press the guard button right before the hit lands. What's interesting is they seem to have made the move that you could teleport from only the big hits. If you hit your enemy away, you can follow your opponent with a super dash that uses a bit of ki, or you can go into the second mode, which is long range fighting. From here you can shoot ki blast at them or even special attacks. Every character has 2 special attacks and 1 ultimate attack. There are a few different special attacks, with the 4 main ones being a beam, a big ball attack, a volley attack, and a rush attack. Depending on which 2 types of attack clash, either one wins, they cancel each other out, or you get the infamous beam struggle, where you spin those sticks, baby! The last special move is your ultimate attack. This attack not only does a lot of damage, but also gives your enemies a concussion. Because once you land this move, the enemy will lose their lock on. So if you get hit by one, you're running around like a headless chicken, trying to find your enemy. I feel like this is a mechanic that does not add much, and it was specifically added for the survival missions I talked about before. There's even a dedicated button to find your enemy, and it just seems to have issues with the cameras in general. It sometimes gets this odd angle, and it also likes to start with the camera right behind you, blocking you from viewing the enemy. There is an easy solution of blocking to move the camera to the side, but why is this even a thing? Back to the ultimate special. To be able to do the special attack, you need to go into burst mode, where you charge over your limit. Once in this mode, you can use it up to do your ultimate special, but it also gives you unlimited ki to use for anything but special attacks. If you want to go into burst mode, you need to use up an energy ball. These will fill up by themselves over time, but I did notice if you deflect ki blast, it will fill up faster. Besides burst mode, these little blue balls can be used to activate what this game calls favorite techniques. They can range from offensive, defensive, or buff to your character. They give the characters a bit more uniqueness to them, which is appreciated because the characters in this game feel very similar. Combo lines are all the same between characters, with just animation being different, and all the special moves are done the same. It does make it easier for someone to pick up and play this game. However, combos feel bland with the few attack lines you have or can do. The small exception to this is the giant characters like the Great Ape. They feel like cheap characters as they have the armor that Budokai 3 had with hyper mode, but you can also block. You can use them outside of the story mode and the other modes in this game. The self-explanatory modes in this game are practice, tutorial, world tournament, and dueling. The more unique mode in this game is Ultimate Battle, but it's just this game's version of Budokai 3 Dragon Arena. It does not have any RPG elements to it, but it does have its own version of capsules, which are Patara earrings. It's the same thing except there's no special moves tied to them, so it's immensely better in my eyes. You won't need to do a bunch of work to be able to do the cool moves. You probably do want to use these Pataras for certain characters because the game is not balanced at all. I think Yamcha is going to need all the help he can get against Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Now, I know what you're thinking. If they don't have breakthrough skill, then what are the Dragon Balls for? First, let's talk about how you get the Dragon Balls. In this game, you pick up the balls lying on the floor by breaking the terrain around you. Once you find all 7, you will summon Shenron, and you have a few options to pick from. Either from a gate that lets you play through a part of the original Dragon Ball, some characters, and a password system to bring over your customized character from Budokai 3. I will say use your wish for the gate and the characters to be able to play all 90 playable characters in this game. That is a lot of characters, but it's a bit inflated. This game has what I like to call the Goku problem. The Goku problem is that one character takes up multiple slots in the roster because they're the main character and have multiple transformations. In this game, base Goku, Super Saiyan 1, 2, 3, 4, and Kid Goku are all different characters. Although to be fair, this applies to every character in this game that has a different form or a transformation. Besides that, there's not much else to say, besides their character illustration which gives you a synopsis of every character. I think this game is a good stepping stone for the series. It expands into a 3D fighter arena, making the game more like the show. It has a lot of fan service with how much of the series it covers, and gives you a few what ifs to enjoy. Combat is fun, but it's very simple and gets bland with how little variation the game has. Special moves are cool to see, but it's a bit of a bummer seeing how many characters share the same move. On top of that, the game has odd camera issues, but it's an enjoyable game nonetheless. So, unlike the characters in the show, let's jump from the first film of this game straight to the last on the PS2 with Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 3. The intro to this game is Goku and his 2 sons having a free-for-all battle with the 3 villains of the show and looking like they watched most, but not all of their oil off. The story in this game starts with 2 characters interacting at the beginning and end of each saga before one stays and talk about each scenario in them. It's cool to see the 2 random characters talking to each other. The presentation of the story is a bit better than the first game. It's still very similar to the original with characters just standing there and talking, but the game has more dynamic cameras and less text on screen. What's interesting is that this game's story is a lot shorter than the first game, even while covering the same amount of content. The main reason for this is how the game condenses multiple fights into one fight. It does this by having a timer or condition that needs to be met, and you get this little prompt to either go into the next phase or fight in the show. An example is everyone fighting Nappa, and the fight ends with his defeat with Goku. This in the other games would have been 3 to 4 separate fights, while here it's just one. This keeps the pace fast while letting you play with multiple characters and feeling like you're not advancing by doing adjacent fights. I think there are 2 downsides to this. If you were to be defeated in the middle of the scenario, you have to start all over, and the scenarios that require you to survive a certain amount of time get annoying to redo. And lastly, some of the fights are not very satisfying. You're not defeating your opponent, you're waiting for some condition to be met so that you can press a button to continue the story. I do find the way this prompt continuing the story is interesting because it's a creative way they use the new mechanic in the game. Before we talk about the new mechanic, let's take a look at the gameplay. How does this gameplay compare to the first one? It's very similar. They didn't change anything but added a lot more to the gameplay. Special moves can now be charged to do more damage, or they added this boost button sequence which I thought was odd. Why wouldn't I want the boost version whether I hit them or not? I think it was a replacement mechanic from the Wii version of this game, which I will briefly talk about it towards the end. Hand-to-hand combos can now be extended with a few new moves in the games like sweeping kicks. Since they can be extended, you want to change your timing and rhythm to keep your opponent from counterattacking, making the game feel so much faster than the first one. These new additions give that bland hand-to-hand fighting for the first game that Sasona needed. There are a good amount of additions, like being able to move in Super Dash to evade moves, or in Burst mode you now have this infinite combo until you run out of energy. There are a lot more niche techniques, like this combo that can only be done in Burst mode in a specific sequence. The game now has a combo list, but it's a bit messy. I'll recommend going into practice mode where they have a tutorial of the game. As usual, this game has practice mode back with the usual World Tournament and Duel with a twist. But first, let's talk about the other single player modes in Ultimate Battle. Here you'll find 3 different modes. Survive is a 3 theme based survival ways where you can keep fighting enemies as they get stronger until you're defeated. Sim Battle is this odd game mode that's like those old browser sim dating games, where you can decide to train to get stronger, explore to find new things, or sleep to recover health that is used up depending on what you do. After 10 actions or days, you'll be thrown into a match and the game lasts until you're defeated or beat 7 enemies. Mission 100 is 100 themed battles with constraints like being able to use a certain amount of characters or a maximum amount of DP points. What are DP points? Well, let's talk about them in the duel mode of this game. They have one-on-ones, but they also added team battles. Each player can pick 1 to 5 characters between the 162 characters in this game, which is counting transformations as different characters of course. While in battles, you can switch between the characters by pressing the same button you use in story mode to continue the story, let's switch to the next fighter. And it's also used to transform, but you will need to use up an energy ball for this. You're probably asking yourself why you want to transform. If you can just pick the transformation from the select screen and it takes up a resource to transform, what's the point? Besides trying to do the cool build up like in the show, it's a balancing mechanism in the DP team battles. In this game mode, you both can build teams, but they must be within the constraints of the allowed points. The more powerful the character, the more points they take up, which include transformations. Sure, you can pick Super Saiyan 4 Goku to start, but they will cost a lot of points, either making your other character picks weak ones, or having fewer fighters in general. Or you can pick base Goku, which costs fewer points, but you can work your way up to Super Saiyan 4 as the battle goes on. I like this mode, as it gives even the worst character a chance or reason to be used, even if they're just an extra body. Now, I know you're dying to know. What does DP stand for? You can ease your mind, for it stands for World Tournament. On the other hand, now has multiple tournament modes and they're blocked behind the in-game timer. You can cheat the time by going in and out of the mode. Each tournament has its gimmick like how the original one has ring outs, or you face specific enemies in another. Dragon Balls have had a small change to them. You get them the same way as before, by destroying terrain, but you don't have to pick them up. You just have to crash into the buildings and you get them. Once you have all 7, you'll see the option in the main menu to use them, and you get Shenron with multiple unlock options. What is interesting is that the dragon that comes up on the Dragon Balls is random. You have a chance to get regular Shenron, red Shenron, or even Porunga, who have different items to give you. So if you get the wrong dragon, you're gonna have to get them again, or just reload without saving. There is another mode in this game, but it's not in the PS2 version, put in the Wii version of the game. It's the same game, but this game had an online feature which is dead now, so there's no reason to have one game over the other besides the controls. With Wii comes a Wii remote that brings motion controls. The special moves can now be done by doing the specific actions, so you can feel like a kid again doing that imaginary Kamehameha. Since the PS2 version does not have motion controls, I think they added the boost mechanic to replace the motion. I have to say, this game was built on the foundation of the first game. It took everything it had and built on top of it. Made the story mode more compact and faster paced. Combat has been spruced up and made into a game that is easy to pick up, but difficult to master. Sadly, because of how easy it is to pick up and play, a lot of characters feel samey with their combo lines, and the only thing that separates them is the animation of the punches and special moves. I was hoping they'll get rid of the unnecessary lockout mechanic as well, but sadly, it's here to stay. The game is still a blast to play, as it has enough depth for most players, a lot of fan service, and a good amount of single player modes. So now that we played both series, which is the better one? The Budokai series has a better presenting story mode, specifically with Budokai 1, but the fight mainly hangs with Budokai 3 vs Tenkaichi 3. They both have their ups and downs, but the better game is Budokai Tenkaichi 3. Why? It mostly has to do with capsules versus Pataras. These things are supposed to be there as supplements to the main game, but with the Budokai series, they're mandatory to have. If you don't have any of them, you can't do more than half the special moves in this game, and the constraint they give each player with capsule slots. The amount of work you have to put in to be able to get these capsules is just exhausting to think about, compared to the Pataras, which are a neat extra and were something I mostly did for single player modes that Tenkaichi 3 has more of. The best thing that Budokai 3 seems to have is a higher ceiling and the gameplay level by having more unique characters and combo lines compared to Tenkaichi 3. But as someone who's not very competitive, I think Tenkaichi 3 has a high enough ceiling with the amount of combos, mechanics, and the high paced action to keep me hooked. So, which is your favorite Dragon Ball Z series on the PS2? And any game or series on the PS2 or GameCube I should look into next? Also, if you're interested in an iconic orange anime protagonist, I recommend watching my last video on Naruto, where we pit the Clash of Ninja series on the GameCube versus the Ultimate Ninja series on the PS2. But as always, my lovely patients, I'll thank you so much for watching and tune in next time. Bye.